Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. In today's video you join me in a different location to normal. I'm actually in my work van here. And what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm actually going to be making a car plant. So as opposed to like a house plant, it's basically a plant that you grow in your car. So I've had this idea for a very long time. I haven't been able to do it because I've only been able to drive for the last couple of years. But now I've got a vehicle and I've given it a little bit of thought. I've decided to go ahead and make a little plant for my van. So the reason I've been thinking about this for a while is because I thought it's just like basically the front of a car is just like a greenhouse. You know, you've got this big windscreen up here. The sun comes in and it gets plenty of light all day long unless you're kind of parked behind a tree or maybe a house. So I thought this would be a really good place to grow something. It's just basically a greenhouse. You have to have a think about what plant I'm going to grow because it can get a bit too extreme. So for example, if you're driving along, most plants will be fine. Vibrations of that aren't going to be a big issue, and also the temperature is going to be kept at a good level. But what I'm really going to have to think about is when it's parked up, all the windows are closed, it's going to get pretty hot in here. Now Scotland's quite cold, our sun's not as hot as some places, so I might not get up into 50 or 60 degrees like it would in some of the hotter countries, but I can certainly expect this fan to get up into 40 degrees on a really hot sunny day without any wind. So I need to think of a plant which can handle really high temperatures. I also need to think of a plant that can handle very low temperatures, because at night time this is going to drop down quite low and there could be a risk of frost, so I need to think of that. I also need to think of a plant that's not going to grow too big, because obviously if it starts getting too high it'll obstruct my view, and it absolutely can't obstruct any of my view whilst driving because that wouldn't be safe. So this is quite a low section, so I'm going to grow a plant here. Hopefully if I take the camera back to about where my vision is, I can probably grow a plant up to about this height, no problem, without worrying about my view. Maybe even up to about this height, because that's where the windscreen wipers are. Any taller than that though, and it would be too high. So when thinking about the plant as well, I've got to think about how often I can water it. It's not like in a house where I can always go out and easily keep an eye on my plants. The plants in here, they're not going to be watered too regularly, and also with the really extreme temperatures it's going to get very dry in here and they're going to need quite a lot of water. So I'm going to have to use a plant that can survive cold conditions, can survive hot conditions, but can also survive without being watered too often and not having much soil as well, because the pot can't be too big, because you can see the size of this little well I have here. So the plant I'm actually going to go for is a jade plant. The reason for that is partly because I have a lot of jade plants in my flat. It's a plant I can easily grow and it does well in most situations. But the main reason is it can handle really high temperatures. It's a succulent, so it can handle the high temperatures and any kind of drought. It's also quite good at low temperatures. As long as it's not a hard frost, it should be okay. It can take temperatures down to about 0 degrees. If there is a frost, it might die. But I'm doing this now in spring. You can see there is still some snow on the ground. It was frosty last night, but there shouldn't be any more frost. I think that was the last of the cold weather, hopefully. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plant this up in a pot today, but it'll probably be a few weeks until it actually finally goes in the van. By then the weather will be warm enough. So what I've done is I've actually got an old yogurt pot and I've cut the bottom off because it's about the right size, and it just so happens that it fits perfectly in that little alcove there. So that's the pot I'm going to be using for my my jade plant. As you can see, it should be able to grow up a decent height. But if I go back to where my vision is when I'm driving, it should be able to get about that high, and as you can see that's a decent height for a plant to be able to grow. So the only other consideration I need to think about with this is I need to be able to stick this down somehow. I've also made sure the container is sealed so I don't have any problems with water leaking into this section, although it does seem to be a sealed off area, so I don't need to worry about water really going to the electrics, but I still don't want to have any water leaking, so I'll keep this sealed. I'll probably glue this down with something that's not too permanent, because if I want to sell the vehicle in the future I don't want to damage the plastics here. And I'm going to put a bit of weight into the bottom of this, some grit or something, so it doesn't kind of move around too much. What I will have to keep an eye on with the jade plant is I can't let it get too top heavy, because obviously the vehicle is going to be constantly accelerating and deaccelerating. It's going to wobble, especially if it's the top heavy jade plant. So I'm going to make sure that I keep the jade plant well pruned. It's going to be quite a small, low shrubby plant. So instead of letting it grow up tall, I'm just going to keep pruning it back, and it's going to have lots of little shoots as opposed to one large shoot. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the flat and I'm going to pot this up with the jade plant, ready to come out here in probably a few weeks' time. So there were a couple of other reasons why I chose the money plant. I was thinking of some cacti as well, but I thought if I was involved in a car crash at all, or I had to break something or something happened and the plant was to move out of the pot, I didn't want a spiky plant coming in, either hitting me or any of my passengers in the passenger seat. So I went for a jade plant because it's pretty harmless. It's not going to really cause much damage if it does end up flying around the cabin for any reason. I was also thinking of some of the other succulents that are a lot more low-lying, like some of the living rocks, and some of the other things like that. Maybe some echiverias or sempervirens or a sedum, but I didn't go for any of them because I thought I wanted to have a bit of height on it. If I did have a very low one, it would kind of spread over that little shelf that I'm going to put this on, and I want to use that shelf still because that's quite handy if I have pens or maybe a notebook or something. So I'm going to leave that kind of free from the plant. So I want something that does grow up and not something that just kind of trails across or stays very flat, because I'd like a little bit of height. As you can see, this is the one I've chosen. Now I've chosen this young jade plant because out of all my young cuttings, this is the one that's got the most branches on it. And as I said before, I want it to be nice and branched so that it doesn't have a long, tall, leggy plant that's top heavy. So I've gone ahead and I put some grit in the bottom of this just to give it a good bit of weight. Also add some drainage, as this hasn't got any drainage holes. It'll be good if there's a bit of where the water can soak away into and leave the top half a bit drier, just in case it does get any waterlogging. And I will have to be careful with the watering just to make sure that it doesn't get waterlogged at any point. But as I've had a lot of experience with jade plants, I don't think there's too much risk of having any kind of watering issues, especially as it's going to be in a very sunny environment. So I'm going to have to take off as much soil as I can from this to fit it in. So I'm just going to carefully tease away quite a lot of the soil just to expose the roots. Now I want to try and retain as many roots as I can so it has the best head start. But I might have to rip some of them off just to try and reduce the size of this right down. But I'll see how far we get. So that looks like we've got about enough off there. You can see there's a decent number of roots that it should do quite well. So I'm just going to lay it out across like this. Just making sure the roots are nicely spaced out so that it fills the pot nicely. I'm actually going to put in some fresh compost. The compost I'm using is just a general multi-purpose compost. The reason for that is I want it to be quite water retentive because there's so much grit in here. I'm a little bit worried that what will happen is it won't have enough moisture for this plant. And although jade plants can do very well in a free draining kind of cactus soil, I find they do grow a lot better in a rich multi-purpose compost. So I'm just going to pack this in. I'm going to have to be quite firm just so it doesn't fall over. And I'm going to give it a very small stake just to keep it upright. But just before I do that, I'm going to cut this back to promote some more branching and also to reduce the height so it's not top heavy. So I'll cut that back there to where that other shoot is. I'll cut this other side shoot down quite hard, just like that, and that should take a lot of the weight off the plant. So you can see there, it's got 3 shoots at the moment, and it will probably grow some more shoots as well with that having been pruned recently. So I've got some old bonsai wire lying around, and I'm going to use this just to stabilise it. So I'm going to get one of my slightly longer pieces, and I'm going to wrap it around the main trunk right at the bottom. But I'm going to be careful not to do it too tight because I don't want it to cut into it and damage the trunk or reduce the growth. So I want to do it around about the middle like that, and then I'm going to wrap this underneath the actual pot, and then on the bottom I'm just going to twist the 2 ends together. Let's see if I can get that on camera for you. Just like that, and that should hold it loosely in the pot so it won't fall over, and it's going to stay like that probably for a few weeks until the roots are established. Once the roots are established, I'm going to put this out in the car. I probably might keep this on. It depends how secure it is once the roots are established. If it still seems a bit wobbly, then I'll keep the cable on permanently, but we'll see how it is. If I do keep it on permanently, I will have to be quite careful to loosen off this cable every now and again so it doesn't start to choke the plant as the plant has a growth spurt and starts widening its stem. So about a month has now passed, and as you can see there's quite a few new shoots here on the jade plant. There's a couple of new shoots from down there where I cut it off. The one that was already at the bottom has continued to grow, and there's also a couple of new shoots at the top where I nipped the top off, and the top one's actually put on quite a bit of growth. It's also quite stable now in the pot. It is a little bit wobbly still, so it's not 100% rooted in as firm as I'd quite like it. So I'm going to leave this metal wire on it for now, but I'll definitely have to keep an eye on that, because as this trunk thickens up, it might start to cut into it. So I'll keep an eye on that, and I'll remove it if I need to. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use epoxy resin. I think I should be able to chip epoxy resin off of this plastic if needs be. So it's just going to sit there, resin it on, and it should look really nice hopefully. At the moment it's a heat wave, so it's really hot in the van. It's about 20 degrees here in Scotland, which is very warm for May. As you can see, time has moved on quite a bit, and we've got some really beautiful spring blossom here in Edinburgh. So I'll go ahead now and I'll epoxy resin this into place, and that's make it nice and secure. So that's the epoxy resin now setting. You can see here, this is where I put it on. Unfortunately, I didn't really have anything to spread it with, so what I've been using is just a rolled up piece of cardboard. So it's not the neatest job, but it should hopefully do. You can see I've managed to smear it all along the edge there, so hopefully that side will set solid. I've also put some down the bottom here. You probably can't really see it because it's underneath the actual pot, but hopefully that's going to set it. Unfortunately, this wasn't able to sit completely flat because of the ridges here, so I wasn't able to put like a layer of epoxy resin on the bottom and set it on the bottom. So that's why I just set it along the edge, and then another bit on the edge of the bottom of the pot over on the other side. So hopefully this will be strong enough. It's pretty much set already. This stuff only sets in about 4 minutes, so it's already hard to touch. It's still a little bit soft. It feels almost like wax or something, but it'll set completely hard soon. So that's it now for the my car plant, basically my Crassula ovata Jade plant that's going to hopefully survive in the car. It is going to be quite a shock for it. It's been in about 20 degrees environment in my living room. It's now going to be very warm in a toasty car, so we'll see how it does. Hopefully it will survive. As I say, this I've given you all the reasons why I chose this as a good plant in the car, because it can survive the extreme temperature changes that we're having. And now that it's May, we shouldn't have any frost, so this should be fine from any cold weather. It can handle cold weather anyway, just if it's a hard frost it could be killed off. So I'll keep you guys updated how this does over the next few weeks, maybe next few months over summer. Should do quite well hopefully. What might happen is, because of such intense sunlight, it might kind of go pink on the edges or a bit reddish. And I'll try and keep it watered when I can. I'm in my van most days, so I should be able to keep a good eye on it. And I'll keep you guys updated as the summer progresses.